peoples. Tumtomi-Waiton, or Belcarra, is home to an ancestral village of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. We're thankful to conduct our work within their territory. I'd like to call to order the meeting at 7:03 p.m. and I will look for on number 2, approval of the agenda. Get someone to move it and second it, and I believe there may be. Okay, so moved. Second. Okay. Councillor Drake, did you?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to note that I will be raising an issue with respect to parks planning under new business. I don't believe it requires a modification. We have a section for new business. I'll just wanted to let council members know that the proposed motion I had sent out a little earlier today, I'll be bringing that up when we get to that part on the agenda. Thank you. Good.
Thank you very much for the notice, and that's in order. So I'll see if anybody on council has any comments, and if not, I'll look to, we have a mover and a seconder for that, and I'll look that the agenda for the regular council meeting, April 11th, 2022 be approved as circulated. All those in favor, raise your hand. And I see it's carried in the affirmative. Okay. Thank you very much. An adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting of March 28, 2022, moved by Councillor Snell with Councillor Clark, seconding that the minutes from the regular council meeting held March 28, 2022 be adopted. Do we have any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll look to call the question. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye. Aye.
And I note that it's carried in the affirmative. So thank you very much. And I would like to, it's my pleasure to welcome the RCMP. I'd like to introduce Superintendent Keith Bramhill, Inspector Todd Balaban, and Corporal Neil Raymer, who will provide an update. So we're looking forward to that. And Superintendent Keith Bramhill, if you want to go ahead and lead off, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Actually, sorry, Mayor Ross, unfortunately, Superintendent Bramhill had an unexpected and unanticipated personal matter to attend to and is not in attendance tonight. So it's Inspector Todd Balaban, who is our operations officer, and myself who are in attendance tonight.
Absolutely understandable. And I know things change. Thank you very much. And we're pleased to have you both here. And Inspector Todd Balaban, do you want to lead off then, please? Or
sure.
Is that okay? Is that, or did you want to do that, Neil?
Yeah,
Get Neil to, sorry, go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, sorry, Inspector. I'll just give you a brief update, kind of a brief overview of the year that was 2021, just to give you some idea of how the year went. In terms of crime, it was a very good year for Belcarra in that pretty much across the board, there was a reduction in the number of calls for service for various crime types, specifically personal offenses, which is generally speaking involves assaults and offenses against the person, such as uttering threats or similar things like that. And property offenses, which would be your break-and enters and your theft from auto and other thefts. Those were pretty much all across the board were down, specifically drawing attention to break and enter and theft from auto, which were both 0 for the year. So 0 is a very good number. So, you know, and that was in keeping with kind of across other communities that property crime was down in a lot of different communities. And Belcarra certainly was part of that process. Calls for service were down about 18%, and that's a tough statistic to kind of work with because that's not necessarily indicative of crime levels. It's how many calls people how many times they call the police, which doesn't necessarily, they might call about a suspicious person, but that's not necessarily a crime. So, but overall, it is one of the indicators that we just keep track of. Overall, the 2000, just to give some perspective, 2019 was the Coquitlam Rural Unit, which is the 3-person unit that's responsible for Anmore and Belcarra and some other areas. We had the lowest crime rate in BC in 2019, and 2021 looks very much the same. And Anmore and Belcarra are the vast majority of the population that we police. So that bodes well that 2021 looks a lot like 2019. And just of note, collisions were down. There was only one during the year, and it was a minor collision. So that is always good to hear. And overall, we just wanted to say that Belcarra is a very safe community. It doesn't get a lot better than Belcarra in terms of crime. So we didn't see anything of particular significance from our perspective, because obviously we deal with a wide range of activities, and Belcarra certainly remains a very safe community. And with that, I'll just pass the baton over to Inspector Balaban, and he has a few comments to make.
Good.
Thanks, Neil. Good evening, everybody. As they said, I'm Inspector Balaban, I'm Operations Officer. I'm responsible for general duty. Neil's team doesn't report to me, reports to another line officer, but we work together with GD, and for what they've been doing, they've been constantly out there, very successful in their operations. They're on the water a lot with their marine boats. We really haven't seen too many calls for service out there, and it's unusually normal that I would see coming to this community for such a low crime rate. We're just interested to hear if there's any concerns you have that you want us to look at, but it's pretty hard with the stats we have because they're actually so low. It's a pretty nice report to see that kind of low ratio of offenses that are going on in your community. And is there anything I can answer for you or any questions you have?
Great. Thank you very much. And we'll look to go first to our counselors. I see Councillor Snell is got a question. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you for that. I was looking at through the chair, of course, I was looking at the your presentation here, and obviously things were fairly quiet. How much of that would you put down to the fact that for the last couple of years we've had COVID and a lot of people have been based at home, not been going out so much, which would sort of account for perhaps the drop in break and enters and a lot of the other things that perhaps if you've got more people at home, there's less inclination for a villain to come in and do harm. So I just wonder how COVID might play into that. The other question that comes to mind here is when I look at your other calls for service, you looked at bylaw, these are noise and other. And interestingly enough, those statistics are halved. And I wonder if on the noise side of things, because people are at home, they have more choices of days of a week when they can make noise. I know myself, if I need to use a pressure washer or a chainsaw or something, I'll try not to do it on the weekend because I respect the fact that working people, that's their time off. And, if I can do it during the week, I will do it during the week. But there's obviously a lot of people that were homebound because of COVID, said, okay, well, I'll do my office work on the weekend and I'll use my chainsaw midweek. So just a thought, because noise is obviously a concern in this village from time to time, and it is a dramatic reduction. And I think you answered my other question, was how we compared with other municipalities. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you for looking after our village.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll take the question, Inspector, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, just in terms of, I'll start with the second part and say that COVID, certainly in my opinion, it's not that we keep stats or try and track these things, but it would be my experience that part of the effect of COVID is that there were far fewer gatherings and far fewer, parties, to say, that would cause people to be concerned about the noise levels. If I were to chalk it up to one particular thing, I think it would be that, because there's just not as many people getting together. and then causing concerns for neighbors around them. And as far as the first one, in terms of COVID's effect on the property crimes, I think there is a lot of truth to that. It's hard to say for certain, of course. You do have people, of course, talking specifically about break and enters. People are home, so harder to get people to get out of their house when they're working from home, and that provides less of an opportunity for people to travel around and see what they see. So I think there is certainly, I would attribute some of the drop in the crime to COVID and its effects, because certainly just people were not moving around as much, and that does limit some criminal opportunities. People would, in other circumstances, be trying to take advantage of.
Okay, thank you very much, Corporal Romer. Let's, anybody else on council with a question for the RCMP? Seeing none, let's go out to the audience and see if we've got some people. And in recognition of our length of our meeting, we'll try and keep whatever comments to a comment or a question of 2 minutes if we could. Anybody out there with a question? Okay, not seeing any. I would say those stats worked out well. People are at least good with things there. So I have, we'll look to receive this. And the motion is that the Village of Belcarra Police Services Level 2021 in review provided by the RCMP be received for information. Councillor Drake, moving it.
I'll move that.
Okay, and Councillor Snell, it was a tie, but I'll go with Councillor Snell for this one. So it's now on the floor. Any discussion by council? Councillor Drake, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, in behalf, I know a number of people, how much we appreciate the work the RCMP do. It obviously helps to keep your crime levels down, but Neil Romer, we appreciate everything you do for the community. And it's something that really makes us all, it's one of the pleasures of living in this area, frankly. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Drake. Any other comments from council? I would just like to add on to that too. Corporal Raymer, I know the calls for service in terms of what show up on the sheet haven't been as high, but I know at times when our community members needed backup from the RCMP because some of the challenges that we were having, that you were there and others from the RCMP. And we really want to reach out and thank you for that extra piece of service. And Inspector Todd Balaban, you have a crew that represents you well each and every day. So thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're more than welcome. Any other comments? If not, I'll look to call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I note that it carries in the affirmative. And thank you very much to both of you, Inspector Balaban and to Corporal Raymer. And we have a special arrangement for you. You're welcome to stay, but you're certainly not obligated. We know how busy you are. So at any time, please feel free to just exit at your convenience. Okay.
Thank you,
Have a
Mayor.
great night.
Good
Yeah,
night.
thanks very much. Thank you. And we will go on to item 4.2, and it's my pleasure to be able to introduce John Wenninger, who will provide a presentation on asset management. And we're looking forward to it. So John, and I don't know if, are you set up to go? I understand you have a PowerPoint.
Yeah, I'm hoping to share my screen.
Yeah, I've
any
made you co-host, so
technical-
you go right ahead.
Okay, are we okay for me to start that? Okay, I'll give
Yes.
it a try here, and looks like we're all set up. So I will do that. And okay, how's that working? Can everybody see that?
Fabulous. I can see it. Everybody, I think we're good.
Okay,
Bruce?
okay,
Yep.
go here. Well, thank you so much, Mayor Ross, and thank you, Council, for inviting me today. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to speak to you today about asset management. This project's been in the works for quite a while, and it's something I'm very passionate about, and I hope you are all as passionate about it as I am, and I'll try to make it as entertaining as I can, given the subject. Before I get started, though, I just want to give a big thanks out to Lorna Dysart, Stuart Novak, and Ken Borgard for their assistance and providing the information on the project. They were really generous with their time and helping me out. So big thanks to them before I get going. I have a lot of information to get through tonight. You probably could see from the reports that were included with the agenda, and I'm going to try and summarize them for you tonight. Hit the top of the wave, so it will be, but it's still quite a bit of information. So rest of time, I'd like to request that maybe you just make note of your questions, and maybe I can answer them, address them at the end of the presentation, if that's okay.
Yeah, and we, just to let you know, John, in recognition of the amount of that you're going to present tonight, what we're looking at is essentially receiving your report. And then out of it, we may have a chance where we want to come back and have more in-depth, but we're conscious that we want to hear that in-depth report from you. So the motion we're going to do is that we receive for information. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Ross.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay, now let's see if I can get this moving here. It's always a bit funny, I find, when I'm trying to advance slides. Yeah, let's try this. Are you seeing the second slide yet? Not yet. Okay, there we are. Okay.
Yep.
We've got it going now. Okay, so tonight, I'll just give you a quick overview of what I'm going to speak to. Give you a really quick overview of the project itself. And then I'll take you through the main components, which was the asset management strategy and roadmap, the asset replacement forecast, and probably the one that council would be most interested in would be the financial forecast. So the project itself had we broke it into 3 stages. As you can see, as I mentioned, there's the strategy and a roadmap, which is really about assessing the internal practices for asset management at Belcarra, and kind of helping provide some areas where there could be some improvement in bolstering the capacity there. The second was the assess the current state of the infrastructure and create a forecast. So that was developing an inventory, assessing the condition of the assets given the best information that we had, and developing an asset replacement forecast. And then the final piece was the financial forecast. So that's understanding what your future capital needs are, what your current capacity is to address those needs, and to just give a projection of how you might be doing going out into the future. All communities are managers of assets. In fact, I would say managing assets is the primary reason that local governments exist, for its infrastructure that provides the services that your community relies on. And for Belcarra, that is primarily water distribution, the fire protection that goes along with that, roads for transportation, trail networks, drainage, infrastructure, and recycling. You are all the stewards of those assets, and those are the assets which the community relies on to provide those very valuable services. So I was really happy to see that in the village's annual report, in the 2020 report in any case, that asset management was closely linked to Belcarra's mission statement. As your statement reads, the Village of Belcarra's mission is to enhance the quality of life for citizens, visitors, and future generations in our municipality and the region. And I would say that all of those aspects of your mission, asset management makes up a key component of that. So I was really, really pleased to see that. Okay, so I'll take you through the first stage. This was more of an internal view, the assessment itself. Asset management isn't anything new. I mean, all communities manage assets and have been doing so since their creation. What this term asset management really is about is kind of aligning these processes that go into making your decisions with respect to infrastructure, aligning them with what is currently considered best practice in the industry. Asset management is really, I always refer to as a continuous improvement process. So it's not like now we're doing asset management or we did asset management last year. It's as in life, it's just something that you're just going to continually get better at.
Yeah.
So as part of the project, I applied the Federation of Canadian Municipalities framework for asset management. I used what they call their readiness scale to have a look at how Belcarra's processes compare to what would be considered best practice. And that's somewhat subjective because it would vary from community to community, depending on your infrastructure, the size of your community, many, many factors. But in any case, I applied this framework for Belcarra. I think it works quite well. Also, I think it was appropriate to use their framework since they provided the funding for this project. And I think my experience as FCM, it has always been very supportive of communities in improving their internal asset management practices. So you can see here, this is the framework. It's got, I'm not going to go through it in detail. You can have a look at it, or you can go to the website if you want to learn more about it, but it really kind of looks at 5 main competency areas for communities and asset management. And that looks at your data and the information that you have for making decision, your policy and your governance, your people capacity and leadership, your planning and decision-making processes. And they also like to look at, how do you kind of contribute and share your knowledge with other communities, which is important to FCM. So those are the 5 areas that we reviewed. And in this review, I interviewed staff and looked at internal documentation and whatever information was available to me. So in each of those 5 competency areas, there's also 3 outcome areas. I won't go into the details here. You can have a look at it. It's in the details of the report. Overall, at a very high level, I won't dive into the details in the interest of time. I found that Belcarra's processes are very good for a small community and the the limited staff that you have. I thought that you're doing a really good job. So hats off to staff in that regard. But of course, there's always a few areas, and I'm sure staff is aware of these as well. I know they are because we've talked about them in the report. But there's a few areas that could use a little bit of attention in the future. And kind of those 4, at a high level, those 4 areas is the just the way that asset information is collected and stored. So right now it's in a variety of formats, as in many communities. You've got spreadsheets, you've got engineering reports, you've got maps and drawings. What is becoming more of a standard in communities is to have a geographic information system, which can be a repository of all that information. So it's easily accessible. If council wants to see a map of certain infrastructure, they want to provide something to the community, it's very much at your fingertips and very easy to manipulate and create that type of data. So in reviewing, we thought that would be something that the village might want to look into moving forward. Another recommendation would be, although the decision making I think is very solid, asset management best practices speak to using more of a formalized risk-based approach to decision making. So although we all, I think we all understand risk in an ad hoc way, we all have different definitions of risk or different risk tolerances. And what asset management likes to do when you formalize it is to get everybody to be able to quantify risk in a way that everybody can agree with. And then that can help you all as council, as decision makers, as understanding, getting, what the risks are for not doing projects or selecting one project or the other. So it's, I think, very helpful to council in getting good information and supporting their decisions. Similarly, I would say documenting the communities or the villages' expectations around service levels, I think for the core assets in any case, would really help the members of the community understand what they can expect for their tax dollars. And I think it would also help staff and council understand what level of investment is needed to meet those service levels, and be able to have a good conversation with the community around that and iterate around, is this the correct service level given the investment that would require for it. So that was something I think would be helpful, and I think a lot of communities are moving to as well. And the last recommendation is a little more, I guess, tangible in a way. Belcarra I've been to many times, and I paddled across from Deep Cove and have always enjoyed the beautiful oceanside community that you all have the pleasure of living in. Given that though, it's also a community that's, it's on some steeper terrain. It's in proximity to some steeper forested areas as well. And I think that makes drainage definitely something to keep your eye on.
Yep.
Often in communities, it's not, it's kind of under the radar. The things that you can see the roads, when your taps are running, other things you can see. Drainage often gets neglected until it starts causing problems. And boy, let me tell you, when drainage starts causing problems for you, it can be a major liability to the community. So I think that's something I would recommend you keep an eye on. And I think there's some good opportunity right now, because I know it's a desire of council in the community to improve the trail network and actually improve drainage, perhaps even daylighting some of the buried infrastructure if possible. Now you have a drainage plan that's been put together. It looks at where you have capacity issues. I think you've got a good opportunity right now to kind of integrate these needs and to view them more holistically rather than just looking at replacing pipes in the ground or upgrading pipes, blindly without really considering your natural environment and the opportunity for those natural assets to provide that service and enhance the quality, I think, of the community's ability to experience it. So that was that's a high level of the assessment. And again, there's much more detail within the report, and happy to answer more questions on it. The next part of it, of the project, was the asset replacement forecast. Now, it's a fancy term, asset replacement forecast. Sounds very technical. And it's really just a useful way that you can visualize the timing of future asset replacements. So by definition, the asset replacement forecast is just the sum in any given year of any of the assets that, given their expected lifespan, would need to be replaced in that year. So I'm going to show you some charts where you can look out, and I've looked out 50 years, and you can kind of see how it goes up and down depending on the age of your assets, the condition, and what kind of assets might need to be replaced at any given time. The first step, really, if you're going to do a replacement forecast, is to get an inventory of your assets. You can't forecast the replacement of them if you don't know what assets you own. So a good part of the project here was to really consolidate the information that I talked about a little bit before, that's in various formats, and bring them all into one. I ended up using a very large spreadsheet that I'll provide to staff, or they already have access to. So it's been consolidated in there, and that contains the best information that I could find on your road system, your water system, your drainage system, recycling, village hall, and your public works building, and your vehicles and equipment. So that was all put together and consolidated into one data set. And then the next step, of course, is if you're going to forecast the dollar values of what you need to replace in the future, then you need to know how much each of those assets is worth. So that was the next step in the process, was to value those assets. So here is just a high level breakdown, and you can see the village has just over $21 million worth of assets, a little over 10 million in the general fund, and a little over 11 million in the water fund. So that's a good amount of assets that you're all responsible for and you're stewards of, and it's a big responsibility. In the report, I've given a little bit of breakdown of the assets. I won't dive too deep here. It's even a little bit deeper if you go into my actual data set. You can get quite a bit more granular than even I'm showing here. But there's a little bit of a breakdown on your water infrastructure. So mostly pipes, but there's other infrastructure that would be reservoirs, pumps, equipment, that type of thing. And similarly, on the general fund assets, here's the breakdown. Just over $10 million there. And you can see, getting back to the drainage side of it, there's a lot of drainage assets here. And as we'll see as we get into the forecast, their lifespans, given the materials, are not as long as water, and it is something to keep an eye on here for you. The roads value, I just want to point out, that's only surface reconstruction, so like an overlay or a mill and fill, that type of treatment. It's not a complete base reconstruction, and there are some areas where I think base reconstruction is probably going to be needed. Not a lot, but there's some along the foreshore there that are showing some distress that would take a little more, I think, unit value of cost than that might be reflected here. Okay, so once we have that information, so we know how long the assets are going to last, and we know what the value of the assets are, we can actually develop a kind of a really useful number for you in terms of evaluating how much you'd need to fund each asset class. And we do that by calculating what we call the annual sustainable investment. Now, it sounds like a fancy term, but it's really not. And I'll give a very simple example of really what it means. Let's take something we're all familiar with. I'm sure we are. We all have a phone or a mobile phone of some sort, I'm sure. So take my iPhone. I think it was, I don't know, so let's say $800 I paid for it. And I know that those last me about 4 years. So I know I'm going to buy it, and then 4 years later, I'm going to need to replace it, and it cost me $800. So I know the sustainable investment, if I was going to put that money away and I'd have the money in the bank so I wouldn't have to use my line of credit to replace that phone, would be $200 a year. So that's really all that the annual sustainable investment is. It's actually just the accumulation. We looked at every asset, and there's thousands of them, but it's quite simple to do in a spreadsheet. Once you have the values in the life, we calculate it out. Okay, for each of those assets, what would I need to put aside, let's say, every year, so that when that asset needs to be replaced, I'd have the money to do it. So that's really all that the annual sustainable investment It's a very powerful number, but it's not complicated to calculate at all. I should note here that this whole project only looked at replacing like for like assets.
Yeah.
Now, it's impossible for me to know that you might want to upgrade something in the future or add something. That's another side to it. And we certainly did look a bit of that, but what the numbers you're going to see is this is what it's going to cost to replace what you have with the same thing. So not increasing the level of service and not acquiring new assets. That you would need to add on to the numbers that I'm providing you. So here's the annual sustainable investment for the general fund. So if you look at all of the asset classes and what you'd need to put aside annually for them, it's about $260,000 a year. In the water fund, it's about $180,000 a year. I'm going to bring those numbers are going to be important later. I'll bring them back up to you as we start looking at how you're doing in the projections, because we're going to want to compare those numbers to, you know, what your current capacity is. Another nice outcome of doing this review of the replacement forecast is we can kind of get an idea of, in general, what the condition of the assets are. So where we had actual condition information, we used it, which we did have on the road network. There was an asset management plan done for that back in 2018 and an assessment, and that information was very good. We know on the water system that it's very new, so I knew the conditions there. And then on other infrastructure, we knew the age of it. I got good information from staff too, where there were certain things that were coming due. We made a note of those as well. So we were able to, at a high level anyway, give you kind of an indication of how things are looking. And you can see in the general fund that things are pretty good. Most of it's pretty good condition in the general fund. A little bit, you know, on the poor side, and I'm sure you recognize that there's some roads and some drainage infrastructure that are nearing the end. You know, some recycling bins, etc. The detail is in the spreadsheets. I won't go into it here. In fact, I'm not even sure if I could answer a detailed question on it because I haven't really combed through that spreadsheet in about a month. But I'd be happy to look into it if you did have more detailed questions. I mean, you know, I think we all know that it's, for the most part, you know, good condition. Most of the infrastructure, the pipes, which is the bulk of it, they have a long lifespan. So, you know, not a concern there. The stuff that is good would be the shorter lifespan things. So you have pump stations and reservoirs and equipment and generator sets, that type of thing that have shorter lifespans, you know, maybe 25 years for, you know, electrical components and control boards and that type of thing. So that's what you're still, you know, the bulk of it, you know, is in good condition. You know, there's probably a few things that you're going to need to replace, of course. That goes without saying. Okay, so here, now that I've done all that talking, here's actually, I'm finally getting to the actual replacement forecast itself. And this is what it looks like. And I should probably spend a second just to explain it to you here. I don't know if you can see my mouse. So it's quite simple. So along the horizontal axis, it's the year, and here we are in 2022. And I extended it out to 2071. I mean, in theory, you could go out further. I'm not sure how practical that is because things change. You know, who knows what life will be like in 2071, but we have to keep our eye on it. Here, this blue line here, what I talked about, that's that annual sustainable investment level. Remember, that is if we take all the assets and we say, what do we need to put aside each year to make sure that we're able to replace them? That's the 260. So I think what's interesting to note is that, you know, what you spend or what you might need to spend is not really that related to what you need to fund. So I really like to distinguish between spending and funding. They're different things. So in some years, like now, you've got newer infrastructure, you might fund at a higher level than you're going to spend. And that's good. And that's good financial management, because you can see coming up, you know, there's some humps here. Now, this is not based on actual condition data, but looking at the information that I received, you have a fair amount of corrugated metal drainage pipe. And it has a, you know, what, a 50-year lifespan? I don't know, because there isn't really a condition assessment on it. And I guess that would be another recommendation, would maybe to have a closer look at some of the infrastructure so we can refine this and see, you know, is this really going to occur in this decade, or is it maybe going to be out here? You know, I can't say. If I just go by the age and what a best practice lifespan would be, this is what it looks like. Okay, so that first hump is a lot of that corrugated metal pipe. You see, that's the storm water. And then that second hump, again, that's actually related to stormwater too, and that's the concrete. So there's a lot of concrete in your system as well. So corrugated metal and concrete, I think you'll appreciate, do not last as well as PVC pipe that you have in your water system. So they're going to come up sooner. And again, I guess that's why I'm tending to bring a bit of attention back to you on the drainage. I don't know. I haven't gone in and looked at the pipes or crawled through them myself. But it might be something worth at least sampling and seeing how it's doing in the future. And that's actually a recommendation that's in the detailed report.
Great.
I'll just point out on this too. It looks very smooth because I use a statistical method to smooth it, because we don't know exactly, you know, if a big asset's going to fail on, or a whole bunch of them in 1 year. We know that doesn't actually happen in reality. They tend to, you know, some will fail a little bit before that, some of those assets, some will be a little bit after. So I use a little process to smooth it, which is, I think, is more realistic, and that would be typical for these types of studies. And I'll just say that before I move on to the next slide, which is the 20-year forecast, where I don't smooth it. You're going to see it's going to look a little bit different, and I'm just preempting a question. It's like, John, why does the 20-year forecast, why do the first 20 years of your long-term forecast not look exactly like your 20-year forecast? That's the reason. This is not smoothed. This is the actual numbers going into it. Now, again, you can see the sustainable investment level, and, you know, here's what the theoretical spend would be, and here's your theoretical fund just for the replacement, not for service upgrades, not for anything else. Okay, so we did a similar thing on your water system. So you can see here, it looks a little bit different. There's also a few humps though. I'll start at the end. You know, you've got some pipes, plastic pipe here, depending on what kind of lifespan you give it. You might start to see that crop up. It might last longer. To be honest, we don't know how PVC pipe lasts. It just went into service in the 1980s. So technically, we actually haven't seen it live out its service life in a municipal situation. So again, that's something, this is theoretical, and something just to keep an eye on. I think we'll all get interested, you know, come 50 or so if I'm still working, probably not. I'll be interested to see, go back and look at your graph here and see how it actually panned out. The other stuff we're a little more certain of. So coming up a little bit sooner, you've got some mechanical equipment, electrical equipment at the Tatlow, Midlow stations. I think that was the main part of that. Then you've got some works at the Tatlow Reservoir, Dutcham Creek Water Tower. That stuff is all in here, the reservoir works and replacements. You know, and I'm not going to put money on that these dates are correct, but I think this might stretch out a bit, you know, or it might contract a bit. We don't know for sure. And I think that's really part of the asset management process, is looking at the condition and seeing, you know, gee, John gave us that chart, you know, let's not, you know, I wouldn't run out and make a capital plan on it necessarily, but it's a heads up that, you know, something that you might want to take a look at to see what actually is happening there, you know, and are John's numbers good, or was he too conservative, or was he not conservative enough? So just keep it in perspective for what it is. And again, there's the water fund 20-year forecast. And where possible, I tried to use you actually have a good 5-year capital plan. So I looked at that and used those numbers. And then I also looked at information that Stuart had provided me, and we'd sat down and gone through a bit of it. So, you know, I think it's a reasonable estimate anyway. Not a capital plan, though. This is not a substitute for your normal capital planning process and keeping an eye on it and doing the 5 years like you're doing. That's the correct way to do it. But if we wanted to look out 20 years and take a guess, or an educated guess, I would say this is what it would look like. Okay, and finally, a financial forecast. Maybe I won't jump to that too quick. Yeah, so this is where we bring together, well, you know, here's the infrastructure funding needs, here's the 20-year requirements, here's what we're spending, and here's what we're raising in our general fund and in tax revenues. Here's what we're raising out of our water utility funds. Here's our other revenues that we have available to us, and having a look to see how those all compare. So that's what I've summarized here. And actually, if you go into the report itself, I've done some charts and a little more detail on it, so you can dig in a little deeper. And I'll just explain at a high level what we've got here. So the two funds, general and the water fund. This first column is your 5-year average capital spending. And that was from your 2022-2026 capital plan. So I basically just took those numbers, averaged them out. I had to do a couple of adjustments because some of the funding is coming from on the MRN roads are coming from TransLake, so I had to net it out. So this is net of those numbers. So that's the spend that I calculate. Here's the 20-year average from the forecast that I created. So you can see how that spending compares. Here's that long-term funding target. And then here's the interesting column where we can compare it all. Here is your current funding capacity. And what that's just the money that's left over, the cash that's left over after you pay all your bills. So after you've collected your revenues, and you paid your bills, here's what's left over. And that could be contributed to capital reserve. It could be contributed to something else as well, if you prefer. Here, you know, for this exercise, I assume, yeah, you could make the decision and use it all for capital funding, which is your biggest expense. So it's interesting to look how these compare. So in the general fund, you have a funding capacity of about $445,000 annually. And the funding target currently is 260. So we're actually doing really, really well. I haven't, I have to say, I have never, and I've done tens and tens of these studies. I've never found a community that was ahead like your community is right now. So really good job there on that. The water fund, you can see there that you've got about $130,000 deficit actually in that. That's completely understandable to me because your debt servicing right now is about $235,000 annually. Your infrastructure is new. You know, in 15 years, that debt will be retired. And if you keep that, if you generate that same revenue, you'll be in a very solid position in the water as well. So I'm not suggesting, you know, I think that's your own decision and how you want to, how you'd approach it, but it didn't concern me that much. I think it depends more on what your goals are in the water fund. Because I know there's been talk about upgrading some reservoirs, etc. And if that's the case, you're going to have to consider what the financing tools are going to be for that. But I think in the long term, your funding seems reasonable, given that after that debt's retired, you can close that funding gap. But again, keep an eye on it and see how it plays out. In terms of what you've got available for financing capacity, you've got about 1.3 million in reserves in the general fund. So not too bad there, and you have no debt. In the water fund, understandably, your reserves are low. For the value of that infrastructure, it's pretty low. And the debt is pretty high, actually, there. I think it's a good, this is probably a good spot. I've been speaking a long time. I'll just jump to the observations in here, or what I feel the conclusions are here. I think generally looking at it, I think you're doing a really good job at creating financial capacity and strength in the village. I know there's been an effort to bolster the reserves, and there's been some tax increase to do that, and you can see, I think it's on the right path for accomplishing just that. And I think that's really going to put the village in a good position to have some flexibility now to maybe invest in some new things. Maybe do some more road upgrades, get on top of that roads asset management plan. Maybe that reservoir could come into play here. Certainly the drainage, the trail system. There's always no end of needs. You know, even the village hall and the you know, the facilities for public works and recycling staff, which are, you know, pretty sparse currently, and maybe accommodating them, you know, in the future and having a look at that. I guess on the one caution side, from my perspective, would be that the debt that you currently have in the water system is consuming quite a bit of your debt capacity. I'd be concerned about taking on much more additional debt. And it's really at the discretion of council or of your view on it. I like to, you don't know what's going to happen in the future. And I think it's prudent to maintain some debt servicing capacity because it's limited by the province as to how much debt servicing you can take on. And I think it's good to have that at hand because you just don't know when you're going to need it. You know, if it's a really strategic project and you need to go forward, that's, of course, you know, those things happen. My view on it, and you know, just from looking at things, I would be cautious in that area. on the plus side, you're accumulating some reserves. So I think you will have, you know, if you, a little bit of patience, you'll have some capacity to take on some larger projects. Again, lots of more detail in the reports that were included in the agenda package. And yeah, I just want to say, you know, congrats to you all. And I don't get to say that very often, believe me. I think all around a really good job here in being prudent stewards of the infrastructure and truly, I would say, being true to your mission statement. And I think that's true. So thank you very much for allowing me to present tonight, and I'm happy to take any of your questions.
Okay, thank you very much, John. What a thorough presentation, and your work and your skill in this area really comes out. So impressive. So why don't we, if we could, we'll go to council. And I'm going to ask if Councillor Drake can lead off. Councillor Drake is our council lead on the asset management. And we've got a council that's very interested in this, but in particular, Councillor Drake has done it. So I'm going to ask him to, and with the councillors will, because I'm conscious of the time, and you know, you've given a very thorough presentation. And so we'll get the councillors to go through and talk about two things. One, if they have a quick question, and second, about the, you know, whether we're going to move to receive this. So that's the primary question in front of us. But let's go through council, see if you have a question, and then we'll move out. And I believe that, you know, as I look at the work you've done, you've got some things that in this 2022 period, we probably want to take a look and see if we want to be doing some of those things. And it may be under Councillor Drake's leadership and with staff to bring you back just to touch base on some of the things we're contemplating. Does that make sense to you? So we don't need to do it all tonight, partly because of the thoroughness of your report. So Councillor Drake, do you want to go ahead, please?
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and through the chair. John, thank you so much for the presentation. I'm very impressed at your ability to summarize a very complex topic in 25 slides and move through them. I think we all recognize that there's an enormous amount of work behind this, and you've made it clear that you're having to make estimates based on information that's short of perfection. Having had the very sobering experience of having gone through quality assessments in organizations, I appreciate that getting scores on your summation that appear to be in the 50% range, maybe a little higher, maybe a little lower in some cases. That's not at all unusual. In fact, I was quite positively impressed. And I'd like to thank our own financial advisor, as well as council's own deliberations in trying to make those very painful decisions to begin to set aside and build some reserves in a very, very small community where, as you note, 98% of the potential to raise money simply means we're going to tax people more. That's always a difficult thing. It's been done. We have to be careful and prudent. And I have questions, but I'll get into them in more detail later on. I definitely think we would like you back because we have to talk about priorities ultimately and make decisions as to where to move. But I see nothing in your recommendations that I would disagree with. And I see much here that makes me very pleased that we've had a professional go through this. So thank you. And I'll defer to other councillors.
Good. Thank you very much, Councillor Drake. And I'll look to other councillors. If you want to just raise your hand so we know, and if councillors are comfortable just with the Councillor Snell, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
I, through the chair, I was looking through the conclusions and the sort of the takeaways that I got this evening was that perhaps our drainage and daylighting of drains is something that we need to be taking a closer look at than perhaps we are doing, and also the road situation. It looks like we've had a very thorough drainage survey in 2018, and there's a number of items on there that I believe are still to be taken care of, as are in fact a lot of the road issues. So those would be two takeaways. The third was I picked up on we should be sort of cautious on new discretionary debt. Now, when we look at this, I noticed that our financial plan has yet to receive its third reading, and I wonder how the expenses on our financial plan are dovetailing into the expenditures that you anticipate over the next little while. So those would be my questions. I think
Okay.
perhaps through the chair to Ken might be able to answer that one.
Okay, and I see Ken's got his hand up, so why don't we go that way? Ken, if you could, please.
Yes, the 2022 to 2026 financial plan has already been adopted by council. The financial plan on the agenda tonight for third reading is an amended financial plan to account for the amount of project spending left for two projects that had to be amended because we only estimated the amount of spending that would occur at the end of 2021 on those projects. So in fact, council has adopted a financial plan, and there's minor amendments that are up for third reading tonight.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. So I note with that Councillor Clark, are you?
Yes, hi.
Do you want to have a quick
Sure.
comment both on if you have a question of content and then obviously just about whether you want to receive the report, but that seems to be from people's real sense. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you. No, just a few comments, really. I'm really happy to see this coming forward to council. This was it's council's number one priority as per the strategic plan, and certainly was always something that I wanted to accomplish. So I understand this is the first phase of this study. When are the phase 2 and 3 be completed? Through the chair, I guess. I'm not sure who.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Clark. I apologize if I wasn't clear. The agenda actually contains the results of all three phases. So there's three
Okay.
reports contained, and what I summarized is actually all three phases. I apologize if I didn't make that clear.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I was a bit confused with. I'm like, oh, I guess I'm just looking at phase 1. Okay, so you also mentioned that is now it's going to be hard to find on my notes, but condition of assets. Can you talk a little bit more about that condition of assets? Because my understanding is something different from what we're seeing here.
Through the chair, a condition of assets, it can come in two forms. It depends if there was condition assessments of the infrastructure, as you had with the 2018 roads assessment.
Yeah.
And that information was used. So actual condition data always preferred. Where there was no condition data available, then we would use the age of the asset as for the condition, which may not reflect the actual condition of the asset. So that would explain if you feel that some asset classes, in your opinion or others' opinion, maybe are not in good condition, then I would say that's a great reason to go out and do some condition assessment on them, and let's get some information, the real data on it, and not rely on the age. Age is really, in my opinion, a poor proxy for condition of infrastructure.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm asking that because I have concerns about our existing tank on Tatlow, how much life we have left on that, as well as the pipes for drainage that you were mentioning. So perhaps that's something that we should discuss as a council to see if we want to take a closer look on those things. But yeah, very thorough report. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. And I'll finish on council just by summarizing. When I read that report, John, I went back to when I commented as we were engaging you, I said, with you, it'd be easier to figure out who you haven't worked for in this province and beyond, right? And I think you did some work in 218 around the roads.
Yes.
And I was very impressed with that as kind of a touchdown. So I was really looking forward to the full version. And as I read it, you just have that ability to take, I think, what are somewhat quite technical pieces and make them very easy for people wherever you are on that kind of technical piece to be able to do it. So I note that you give some things in 2022 that we may, as a council, as a community, want to look at. And so I would hope that as we do that with council, and that's why I was suggesting we'll take a bit of a look, council, and look at what we want to plan, and then maybe have you come back in for a more full discussion. But what I'd like to do right now is go out to the community, and we're going to try and we'll give each speaker, we've got quite a full agenda. We'll give each speaker 2 minutes to make a question, but also in particular to just say, is this a report that council should be receiving? So I'll take a look and see if we've got any takers in the community. And I'm not seeing anybody come back. So that's probably the ultimate compliment, John, where it's been so clear. So thank you very much. And with that, if Councillor Drake, did you want to move a motion that's in front of you that this be received for information, and then we'll seek a seconder?
Yes, I thank you, Your Worship. I will move that motion.
Okay, and a seconder on that, Councillor Snell, thank you very much. So it's on the table for discussion by council. Councillor Drake, lead if you'd like.
Yes, thank you. The one thing I would like to note is that this is really early going, and we really need to turn this over to staff to have a look at what the practical implications of this will be. And I can see a number of them here. And I think there's, as I said earlier, I'm very pleased to see the overall assessment. And I'm also pleased that we seem to have managed to move in the right direction with a lot of encouragement from Ken and others, so that we are in a position to begin to take some of these steps that John has recommended. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. Any other councillors on this? Okay, then what I would suggest is I'll look to call the question. All those in favor? Aye. I note that it carries and it's unanimous. So John, I really want to thank you on behalf of just being able to come in and give such a good presentation, such a fulsome one, and really points us into some parts that are important that we can do. And I think Councillor Drake, we talked about it earlier. I think it is important. We've got good staff. You can see by the assists that they were able to give you, and we can go away, get them to come back with a bit of a game plan. And I notice in the quarters right now, there are some things that we can do. Some of the councillors have raised them. So we'll look forward to engaging with you again. And thank you very much for your work, your effort, and for a fabulous presentation. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So, and you get the same deal. When you'd like to, you're welcome to just be able to call it a night. Thank you. Okay, so we will we'll look to go to number 5. And that is Ken's going to outline the next report.
Thank you, Your Worship. It might be helpful if I could share my screen.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
You can share now.
How is that? Is that coming through?
I can see it. How about
Yes,
other
I can see
people?
it.
Yes.
Okay,
You're good, Ken. Thank you.
okay. and minus that. This report has arisen because council previously deferred a fees and charges bylaw that was related to the fee increases for user rates for water, which included some descriptions around fire sprinkler systems. And as a result of that, this user fee bylaw was deferred, and the user fee bylaw needs to be finalized in May, early May, so that we can produce the tax notices with the new user fees on them. So we've delved into the issue, and we've included in this report previous minutes related to the fire sprinkler systems, including pertinent information that came forward in the past from the December 7th meeting, whereby Chris Boyd answered some concerns. And under his minutes, it said that there was no mandatory regulations and health concerns for the potential. It says there are mandatory regulations and health concerns for the potential of cross-contamination if a property connected to the water system for sprinklers only without decommissioning the well. So I think the gist of the concerns as I read them is that the fire sprinkler systems, there was an onus or a desire that fire sprinkler systems not be charged a higher user rate just because they're being only used for fire sprinkler purposes. Now, the fact of the matter is that once one connects to the municipal water system, it's impossible to tell whether the water is being used for other purposes or just a fire sprinkler. And the fact of the matter is once you're connected to the municipal system, you want to disconnect from the well because of possible cross-contamination issues. So when we looked at the bylaw, we came to the conclusion that it could be a lot clearer in some areas. Because you have a situation where we have three categories, and you can see them on the screen right now. Right now, there's a basic fee for fire protection, and it has the wording prorated upon date of permit for use fee domestic, and then it says or use fee fire sprinkler system or use fee fire sprinkler system. And then we have a use fee for domestic prorated as of 1 month after the first day of the month for which the connection permit is issued. And then we have a third category called use fee fire sprinkler system, prorated as of 1 month after the first day of the month for which the connection permit is issued. So in looking at the wording, of course, the fire sprinkler system shows up in the two categories, the basic fee and the use fee. And so I think that was some cause for confusion, and that the bylaw can be improved upon, because basically there's two categories that we're dealing with here. You're dealing with the category whereby you're not connected to the water system, and that's your basic fire protection fee, which is lower. And you're dealing with a situation where you are connected to the water system, which is the higher fee. So for clarity purposes, we think that you can eliminate the third category because it's just, and you can eliminate the wording that refers to fire sprinkler systems in the bylaw. and create two categories that are very clear in that one category is for those that aren't connected to the water system. And the second category is for those connected to the water system. So as I was saying, it's impossible to tell once one is connected to the municipal water system, what that water is being used for, whether it's being used for potable purposes or just a fire sprinkler system. But the bottom line, I think, is that in the village's capital plan is a plan to move over to a system whereby residents would have a water meter and will be charged for actual water usage. So I think the issue, once that system is installed, if, for example, someone was having minor water use for just being connected to a water system, they would hardly see any charge at all if you were actually measuring for actual water usage only. So the other thing is we have looked back and there has no circumstances that we can find where someone is connected to the water system solely for the use of a sprinkler system. So I think that we're talking about a very unique situation here. If someone would connect to the system for only a sprinkler system. And I think we ultimately want to move towards, as we have in the capital plan provided for, a system that promotes water conservation. And that would be through a metered water charge for each residence. And so I think that by making the changes that we've recommended here, that we can be more clear within the bylaw in that there's only two categories here. Either you're connected or you're not. And if you're connected, you have a higher fee. The fact of the matter too is that this user fee bylaw, the wording in it is in sync and parallels the consolidated waterworks bylaw, which is attached. And that when we make changes to the user fee bylaw, we should make the same changes into the consolidated waterworks bylaw so that those two bylaws are in sync. So right now, we are recommending that these changes as noted in the recommendation, the wording as noted here in the crossouts that would occur with only the two categories be reflected in the user fee bylaw which would come forward for third reading. So we would bring it forward for third reading at the April 25th meeting of council and adoption at the May 9th meeting of council so that we can have the new user fees reflected on the tax notices and which are reflected in council's 2022 budget. I think unless Stuart has some added comments that would summarize the report.
Comments?
Well, I think the objective turned out in this report to be simplifying the fees and charges bylaw with respect to the water system. I don't know 100% know if it met the objective of council's direction. However, as Ken was advising, if we plan to go to a metered system down the road, that'll be there won't be any, ultimately won't be any extra charges for people who choose to hook up for the sprinkler system, because there will be an incredibly minimal amount of water to be used in the actual sprinkler system. Once again, it ends up being a choice to council whether they want to approve or accept this simplified system, or whether it goes back to staff for any rewording at council's wishes.
Okay, good. So why don't we open it up to council right now? And Ken, as I understand, it's there for council to look at, and then you've given an indication if they're comfortable with it when it will come forward. So we've got Councillor Drake on the speakers list. Councillor Drake, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ken. I appreciate the summary. I must say I found this quite confusing initially. But it seems to me there's several issues. The first, to me, there's a core question here, which you've touched on, which is, do we or do we not intend to allow individuals to connect for sprinkler benefits alone, i.e. not for the domestic water supply? If we do not intend to do that, then I don't think there's anything further to be discussed. And this, we have gone around this several times. And you note, and I think it's a good summary, you note Chris Bolt's original comment that there were regulations and health concerns. I gather there are health concerns, and I understand there have been issues raised with the appropriate health authorities who'd indicated they don't wish to comment now because there is no proposal to do this. And they may well comment if we do propose to allow sprinkler-only connections without domestic use. So I understand that there are concerns, and I understand we may not be able to do what I had originally proposed for the simple reason that the health authorities won't tolerate it. But I don't believe there's any mandatory regulations. And maybe I could first just ask if Stuart can confirm that, because I think he came back previously on that, noting that no one could find specific regulations, mandatory regulations. Is that correct, Stuart, or do you recall at this point?
Yeah, through the chair, do you want to take that, Stuart, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Right now, the plumbing code prohibits any cross-contamination. That is what it focuses on. So there can be two sources. There cannot be any cross-connection. That does create quite a bit of concern, because if a person hooks up for a sprinkler system design, and once it's been approved, they can quite simply, just patch into the service and connect their domestic supply. And two, when you design for residential single and two family dwellings is NFPA 13D. That's what the standard is. Within that, it's generally not engineered design because it's a very simplified system. What they usually do for circulating the water is to plumb into one of the toilets to get that flushing motion to circulate that water. So what that can do, without being an engineered design, it can actually cause a cross connection if the plumber or the sprinkler fitter is not acutely aware.
Okay, but I take that to be, and I understand that. I understand the concern, but there isn't an absolute mandate prohibiting this. It sounds like it's very difficult. It sounds like there's genuine basis for concern, and I appreciate that. But that it's not prohibited other than it's considered unsafe, and I assume could be on a case-by-case basis. We could be directed not to allow it simply from the health authority. Is that a fair summary?
Through the chair to Stuart, I think that's to you.
That is correct. It is not against the code to have two water services in the house, one for sprinkler system design and one for domestic. as long as they're not cross-connected.
Okay, look, I have a bit of a fixation on this personally. It may well be the balance of council isn't remotely interested, so I don't want to drag it on too long before we hear from the rest of council. But I do have another concern. At the very end of this report, we talk about, at the very last wording, I'll just read it. These changes are aimed at providing clarity in that either a property is connected to the water system or is not. And upon connection to the water system, any wells should be decommissioned for health reasons. That if we adopted that approach, I believe that would be a change of our policy. For those who were about for the were here when we introduced the water system, there was a lot of anxiety. I mean, it's not as though it was 95-5. The issue was, in my sense, probably 60-40 in favor of water. And a lot of people had a very strong attachment to their existing water system.
Yep.
And the council today indicated that, well, we did two things, right? We didn't force people to connect, provided the water source was on their own property. And secondly, we indicated you could keep your well for external use. You could not have it connected to the house. And I just want to remind council members, that's what I've always taken to be our policy. This sounds to me like a change of our policy, and water is a very sensitive topic. I would be uncomfortable adopting that change that would bar people, or in fact require them to decommission a well if they happen to connect domestically. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Drake. So I'm not seeing any other members. Oh, I am. That's okay. Councillor Clark, do you want to go ahead, please?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. I'd just like to thank Councillor Drakes for his comments, and also Ken and Stuart for the report. Well, two things here. If there's a great concern of cross-contamination from a resident that could trigger that without knowing. I mean, that's pretty, as Councillor Drake was just saying, that's pretty dangerous and puts us in a position that's probably not good, and we don't want to be in, because there's a lot of liability with that comes with that as well. And yeah, I agree with Councillor Drake's comment too. People are passionate about their wells here, so I don't want to be telling people to put a cement pad on top of their wells and disconnect completely. I think people should do as they wish, on this. So I'll just leave it at that. But it makes me a bit uncomfortable too, because I love those reasons. Thank you.
Yeah. So I want to build on Councillor Drake and Councillor Clark. I'd like to talk to Stuart for a second, is specifically on that. And upon connection to the water system, any well should be decommissioned for health reasons. So Stuart, so my understanding is this, that when people connect up to the water system, they connect up, they're connected, they have a well, they can maintain that well, but they need something on it to say that this is, non-potable, right? Like, that's my understanding when people move on to the system. Is this meaning something else? Like, is this specific to there's some other issue, or am I in error on what happens when people hook up to the water system? Stuart, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Ross. Yes, right now the provincial regulations or the provincial regulations state that if a well is out of use, it must be decommissioned according to the regulations of the province. It must be decommissioned if the well is not in use anymore. Therefore, they established a policy years ago to leave the well in use and allow the resident to attach a hose bib or an outside tap to the well.
Yep.
To keep the water moving. So the whole house would be connected to the municipal water supply.
Right.
And one outside hose bib, generally speaking, could
Yes.
still be attached to the well. And yes, you're right, we would have some other regulations like, or criteria, like having a sign saying non-potable water, things
Right.
like that.
So
which we
just,
still do.
yeah, and thank you for that answer, but so it seems as Counselor Drake and then Counselor Clark kind of built on it. Like, is it what I thought was right, and I think you clarified that that's what's happening. But what does this mean? Should be decommissioned for health reasons? Is that a well that when you go to get on the water system, it's not producing potable water, or it's just not producing water? Is that like, because I think Counselor Drake, I just don't understand with that answer how the decommission for health reasons. Am I just missing something, Stuart?
Once again, those words weren't mine. Those were from a report from the engineer previously, and I do believe, and I also believe that he was being general in his language and advising that wells need to be decommissioned when they're out of use.
Okay, so this is, as I understand, and then I'll leave it, but this is going forward for 2 subsequent meetings. If someone signs up for the water and they get what I related and you seem to say is fine, you can have one hose attached. You get a little marker that says this is not for portable use, and it's one hose bib, right? Like, can we just have a look to see if we're in sync on that to what our actual practice is for people that are right now hooking up to the water system? I don't need you to do anything tonight, but if it's someone else's words, can we get it to a point where it matches what I think we're saying to people they can do?
May I speak?
Yep, sure,
to that?
absolutely.
So, just to confirm, yes, that policy and practice is in place, that when we do have a hookup, we do allow this. I don't consider it the best practice available, but it is legal because the well will still be in use.
Yep.
And it is completely separated from the domestic water supply.
Okay. So I'll leave that where we are right now, and thank you. And I'll take my hand down and okay. Okay, I've got Counselor Drake and Counselor Clark. I'm gonna take one more question from both of you, but you're on second time questions, and then we're gonna go to the audience and then come back, because we've got a lot in front of us, okay? So Counselor Clark, I have you first, and Counselor Drake, and then I'm gonna go to Jim Chisholm or Sherry Chisholm and Joe Elworthy, okay?
You have Counselor Snell as well, I believe.
Yeah, so so we're gonna be here till after 11 tonight. Like, I just called the 2 counselors. I'm not gonna speak again, okay? So I called what I saw, and I believe Counselor Snell, you raised your hand, so I'm hoping that you can listen to Counselor Drake, Counselor Clark. We can go to the 2 and we can come back and have our vote, okay?
Okay, it's just Mayor Ross, just for clarity, is Council Snell gonna get to speak to the item?
Well, here's what I'm saying, Counselor Clark. I asked for people to try and speak once. I've spoken once. I'm not going to speak again. We've got, as soon as I finished on that part, we had 2 counselors come up, right? So Counselor Snell was not on the list. I indicated I'm going to go to Counselor Drake and Counselor Clark and Jim or Sherry Chisholm, and then I'm going to go. If we're going to have everybody talk forever, we're going to be back to what we were last week, right?
Okay, I'm just happy to give my turn to councillors now,
Okay.
because I don't think he spoke to the subject, if I'm not
Okay, sure,
mistaken.
fair
Thank you.
enough. Yep, that's good. Okay,
And I'm prepared to do the same thing, Your Worship. I would be reiterating the points I'd already made.
okay, thank you. Counselor Snell, do you want to go then? And then we'll go to Jim Chisholm and or Sherry and Joe Elworthy. Councillor Snell, go ahead.
Yes, this would be my first comment on the subject. I'm a little bit confused here because we're talking about three issues. The issue in front of us is looking at fees and bylaws. That's the actual recommendation we're looking at the moment. And we're now talking about decommissioning wells, and we're now talking about somebody that wants a sprinkler system without hooking up to the city water. So we seem to be going in three directions at once here, rather than the issue that's actually on the table. My own understanding of the well issue, I was one of the first in the village to go onto the water. I have I have a functioning well. I still have a functioning well. It's connected to a standpipe with a hose on it. And if I need to draw water from my well, I throw a switch and I can use my well water for irrigation or for firefighting or anything like that. As far as the house is concerned, that's 100% on city water. There's no confusion to my mind on that particular point. So I will be quiet now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate the point you're making there. And Sherry, is that you?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to make a little more clear, there seems to be misunderstandings. There is no cross connection. When you put your sprinkler fire protection system in your home, that's completely no connection to the city water. It's a complete separate system. So there's no cross contamination or possibility. There's an empty space. There's no cross connection. And we were asking for ourselves and others to encourage people to put in a fire sprinkler system, that there be no fee, because it helps protect the homes and the fire department. So that's why we pushed for this. But there's this misunderstanding of cross-contamination. And if you think that possibly people would cheat and use the water without paying for it, well, there would be a meter in there. You would know if they were using the water. So those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Sherry. Appreciate those. And we'll go to Joe Elworthy, and then we'll come back to council.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council, for the opportunity to wade into this. I must agree with Councillor Snell's concerns. I think we've come a long ways from when we were talking about a sprinkler hookup, and yet no one being in that position right now to someone of an open season on explanations as to what really is happening and what is allowed and permitted on a hookup to the water system. I am hooked up to the water system for the record. And it strikes me as, obviously I was never involved or informed that one could keep a well. It was very clear to us there was a requirement to decommission your well when you hooked up. And there is nowhere in any policy that I've seen, and I would like to see it, if indeed, as Stuart has pointed out, that there is a policy that you can actually keep a well for outside tap water, although that makes a certain amount of sense. I'm not saying I'm opposed to it. I'm just saying that certainly was never clear. And so it's interesting to me, or to me. And one final point that I think I just want to make on this, and that is that when it seems like reviewing the bylaws in depth and complicated as they are to cover all of the anomalies, and it was a very heated discussion in this village at the time, and Councillor Drake is right, probably pretty close as to the number of people who were in favour and those who weren't. And it's probably pretty close to this day, the number of people who are hooked up and who aren't onto the domestic water system. And indeed, we're even running into debates on the importance of whether indeed this was primarily a domestic system and secondarily a fire system. even that's becoming somewhat blurred in the discussions today. But I will refer you to Article number 17 of your bylaws, J, where there is a requirement for when you change the title of your home, when you sell your home, that you are required, irrespective of all else that you're discussing. The requirement is that you will hook up within a period of time to that water system. So it seems to me there's a lot of education. I'm sorry for taking too much of your time. I know you've got a busy schedule. No response is required. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. Okay, so coming back to council. So Ken, do you want to just indicate what you need to get council to? I guess we need a motion on exactly what's there, correct? Ken?
Yes, I mean, I think we are talking about two separate issues tonight.
Yep.
And, you know, all we want to do now is get the fees adjusted within the Utica fee bylaw and to provide some clarity within that bylaw.
Yeah.
And to get the two categories so that there is clarity.
Okay, so there's a motion needed as you see it moved by, so we need a counselor to move it and someone to second it, please.
I will move that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Snell. A second. There's no second. Okay, for the sake of discussion, our acting corporate officer, who is the acting mayor?
As Councillor
Deputy mayor.
Clark.
Pardon me? Okay, so I will leave
Oh,
the
Councillor
chair.
Clark, there. Okay.
I will leave the chair, and Councillor Clark, if you could take over for the duration of this motion. And so I will second the motion that Councillor Snell made. So,
Sounds good. Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder. Any more discussion from council? Would you like to? Okay, please go ahead, Councillor Drake. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Yeah. My concern with this is that we're ending up with a situation where we have left a sprinklered system that I believe we can confirm is not interconnected. And we have left that at a financial difference from someone who is not connected to the system. So it comes back to the fundamental issue, the motion that is included in the report that I had brought forward originally. I simply want a situation where we encourage homeowners to put in sprinkler systems. The moment they want to use the water for domestic purposes, great, they can pay the consumption fee. And once we start to measure, we can determine whether or not someone's consuming water. But every time we secure an additional home with sprinklers, we are all beneficiaries. And I think it was the same point I raised originally. So that's why I object to this. The way we've now got it worded, we've got only two categories. I appreciate that's simple, connected and unconnected. However, we have a very unique circumstance if someone wants to use the water pressure and the water system in the unlikely and hopefully never event that there is a fire in their home. And I think that's a positive thing for everyone. So it seems impossible for us to accommodate this. So again, I appreciate this has to be passed. We need to get it worked into our tax processes. I'm prepared to do yet another meeting, and I'm prepared to try to think of a way around this. And I certainly want security. I don't want anybody placed in any jeopardy. But it seems to me it's incomprehensible that we can't find a way to do this. So I'll pause there. I won't be voting in favor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Drake. Any more comments from council members?
Yeah, I'll make a comment.
Yeah, please go ahead, Mayor Ross.
You know, I know Bruce, and you and I've talked about this in the past, and I've certainly heard your part, but I guess the piece for me, and it comes down to this, is what we've got on the table is we need to either pass something so we can move forward. There's a fundamental piece there. There's also the piece that, you know, in terms of if there is that cross contamination, I mean, I still haven't heard where the security is around that. Like hearing that if it happens, we'll get to it. We're not metering right now. We're not have any ability. Like right now, if something happens, it happens to the system, as I understand. So I find some frustration on the last point that was put in there, and I don't like that part. I don't believe it's part of this motion, but the part that says, you know, for health reasons, I find that out of step with what we're doing. And I think that should be rectified, but I don't believe that's what we're voting on right now. So Bruce, I certainly admire your principled approach over time. I just don't think on this one, we've got the safety piece. So I'm going to be voting in favor of this.
Thank you. If I might, through the chair, just a brief response.
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead, Councillor
Thank you.
Drake.
Look, I share the frustration, Mayor Ross, that you have, and we're in a unique situation. We have unique level of risk in terms of fire, and we may have some people prepared to help reduce that risk. I just think we should be making the effort to address this. And, you know, we have a number of other mechanisms, as I'm sure Stuart or our engineers can confirm, to reduce the risk of cross-contamination. And it's flow controls, and we have those on any home that connects. I'd certainly expect it in this case to be one. And it isn't. I mean, we're not going to see six or 10 of these. We might see one or two. It's not that difficult to check the meters once a month or every 2 months or whatever. I just think the risk here is so small, it's not worth our getting preoccupied with. But again, let's let council decide. And I would finally say it could be resolved if we went back to the initial point I made. If council wants to decide that it does not want sprinkler only connections, it just has to make that decision and this all goes away. But I mean, what we're seeing here is a proposal that assumes that it doesn't have council make that decision. Thank you.
Okay, so Mayor Ross, would you like to respond to Councillor Drake's comments?
No, I'm fine.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank
Okay,
you.
your hands up. Okay.
Oh, no, I was joining the club. I didn't want to, thank you. I was actually, I'll take it down.
Okay, so I'm gonna
Join the club.
I'm going to allow one more quick comment from the Chisholms, and then it's gonna go back to council, and that's where it's gonna stay until a vote. Okay, so please go ahead, Sherry.
Hi, I think there is a lot of confusion over this. It doesn't affect that many homes in the community. Mine happens to be one of them. I think it's a shame for the councillors to vote on this when they clearly don't understand it. It sounds like Bruce does, but couldn't this be delayed so that you could better understand it before you take a vote? It seems like it's being pushed through. I got the indication that the council wasn't that big in favor of it, which required that the mayor hop down out of his mayor's seat. This just seems very odd to me and irregular. I would hope you councillors will really think about passing this tonight and delaying it for until you have a better understanding of what you're deciding. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. So actually, I was just gonna make that suggestion myself after you spoke, but please go ahead, Councillor Drake. And then I'll put my comments in.
Yeah, sorry. I think the situation is precisely as I described it, Sherry. While there isn't a regulation, I think there is a genuine concern. And it may be that if we propose to do this, there will be an intervention from the health authorities who are perfectly entitled to do so and direct us not to do this. I think that's very genuine. And I just think that the risk is very minor. I'm going to stop now till we hit a vote.
Okay, so I have a suggestion for council. I think, we don't have a full council today at the table, and it looks like there's some confusion around the motion. So would the mover and seconder be willing to perhaps defer this to next meeting? So councilors, as well as the community, has some more time to go through this and think about this, and maybe understand better if there's a bit of unclarity around the table. Paula, please go ahead.
This item is to be brought forward for third reading at the next meeting. So you're not going to read the bylaw at this meeting. You're just more or less receiving the information and read the bylaw at the next meeting. If you need some clarity on some of these items, maybe we can bring a further report forward at that time. Because if we bring it to the next meeting, we won't have it ready for tax time. We have a deadline for taxes. So if we approve these motions, it says is to be brought forward for third reading at subsequent meeting. So that's not tonight that you're reading the bylaw. You are just bringing it forward. So if you need more clarity, we can have another report brought forward to the next meeting, where if you agree with what's presented, then you can read it a third time. Would that make council feel a little more comfortable?
Yes, no, thank you very much for this, Paula. Yeah, it's clear to me that we wouldn't be passing this today. However, if council is, I don't know how this is gonna go, it could be defeated today as well. So if council feel that we should do 2 readings today and maybe some more discussion on the next meeting, or if you want to defer this all together, I'll leave it up to council. Please, Councillor Drake, you can go ahead, and then I'll pass the word back to you, Paolo, okay?
Thank you. I just the point that you've just raised, Councillor Clark, that I think this may well be defeated. I don't think any of us want to see it unresolved. To defeat it, I think, would put us into a very odd situation. Frankly, I would rather see it delayed, have a more fulsome discussion at the next meeting. I'm conscious we've gone far too long on it now. And then I'm quite prepared, contrary to my usual preference, to see multiple readings at another meeting. We don't have to have this run into our tax circumstances. And frankly, we're debating angels still on the head of a pin. I mean, there isn't a single home that's going to be affected by the tax impact here at the moment. So I'm quite prepared to see us do multiple readings at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Drake. Paula, you have your hand up.
Sorry.
Would you like?
Okay, just to be clear, the bylaw has been read twice already on December 6th. Then there was a question about the content. So this was supposed to be on the last meeting agenda, and then we had to bump things forward. So now this is just coming here for information. The third reading won't be till the next meeting, and the adoption will not be till the meeting after that. So, so
that's more clear.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. I'm not feeling very good today, so my brain's a bit fuzzy. But I did have a feeling that we had talked about this before. Mayor Ross, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think that this is simply to move it forward, and that's why I left the chair, and that's why I was encouraging us to try and keep moving on this. I don't think there's no decision being made tonight. It's just making sure we can get to the place we need to get to. And, that has a vote happening later, and people can weigh in then, and that's appropriate. But we're now at the, because of things just kind of lining up, we're starting to get close to where what in fact we may do is either do a lot of readings in a night or need to have another meeting. Like, you don't want to run this up against the deadline. There's no defeating it. We're simply putting it forward.
Okay, so with that, I guess if there's the mover and the seconder are okay with voting on this item as is right now for a third reading the next meeting. So I'm going to call the vote. Okay, so all in favor? Okay, so the motion carries, and it carries unanimously. Back to you, Mayor Ross. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, Councillor Clark. So We're now on item 5.2. So Paula, if you could go ahead. And thanks, Councillor Clark, for handling that. Appreciate that.
Okay, the purpose of this next report is regarding the multi-use path. It's just a summary of the questions from the March 28th meeting that were questions and comments presented to Shazana Haskell of TransLink. And it's just an overview of everything that happened at the meeting, the questions that were asked by the community and the answers that were provided.
Okay, so if we have a counselor based on that, looking to move it and second it so we can receive it for information.
So moved.
Okay,
Moved.
I'll second.
thank you. Moved and seconded. Any discussion from council? Okay, Ken, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to provide a bit of clarity around the funding for the multi-use path project.
Yep, sure.
The Village of Belcarra's share of this project has always been budgeted to come from the Community Works Gas Tax Fund.
Okay,
That's a reserve fund, and the money in that reserve fund comes from the federal government. It doesn't come from Village of Belcarra taxpayers. So the monies that are being suggested as a contribution from the village, in fact, would come from the Community Works Gas Tax Fund, which is federal funding. And so I thought that should just be iterated to council. And the current balance in the Community Works Gas Tax Reserve as at the end of 2021 is approximately $566,000.
okay. And thank you for that. I think on this, and I'd heard you say that before, not the large number, but that it was coming from the Community Works, the federal government part. That, but on this one right now, I think the motion that's on the floor right now, we're just simply looking to accept what was the report that was produced. So I think you may be looking over the page to the notice of motion. Is that correct?
Yes, probably, yes.
Okay, so that's valuable information. And when we get to the notice of motion, I will indicate to you that those comments are good ones, but they should probably come forward or they would be useful to come forward again on April 25th.
Okay.
Okay, but thank you for that. So on this one right now, I think we've got a mover and seconder, correct?
Yes.
Okay, any discussion from council? Any discussion from any members of the audience? Seeing none, we'll come back and we'll look to call the question that it be received for information. Okay? Everybody good on that? No further discussion? All those in favor, raise.
Aye.
Okay, and I note that it passes. And then you'll see, and this is where, and Ken, thank you for those. On this notice of motion, I am simply as a matter of making sure that there's information out there, that people are aware that on the 25th, I intend to move this notice of motion. And so tonight, I'm not looking for a seconder. I'm moving the notice. And so this would just simply be registered to go forward on the 25th as per a usual notice of motion request. Make sense? So we're even though Ken was looking to provide detail, it was good detail, but a meeting early. Make sense? So if there's no questions, having served that notice of motion, then it will come up at the following meeting and we're fine to move forward. Make sense? Any questions?
I have a comment, Mayor Rouse, if I may.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Ken, for the information about the reserve fund coming from the tax fund. And I know we're going to talk about this some more next meeting. But I do want to say that although it's coming from Federal Reserve, this is money that's being allocated to Belcarra, and it's all taxpayers' money. So it's still all of our money. Everybody's around the region as well as the province, and I guess on a federal level. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, moving on, the report from the mayor and the project lead. So
Excuse me, Mayor Ross, can we
Yes.
just take a quick break?
I'm
Sorry, it's
absolutely
9
good.
o'clock.
I wondered when you're going to let us know. So it's
Thank you.
9:03 and we'll take a standing recess of 8 minutes and we will come back. Thank you very much. And then I'll
Thank
move
you.
into that. Yep. Okay, good. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in 8 minutes.
Hi, Sherry. We see you. Hey, Sherry, you like my shirt?
Hello, everyone. We'll look to get back in about the next 30 seconds. If you can just connect and we'll move forward. Okay, thanks very much. I've got on my mayor's report a couple things I just want to report out on. On April 1st, Pope Francis apologized for the conduct of some members of the Roman Catholic Church in Canada's residential school system following weeks of talks with a week of talks with First Nations, including Inuit and Métis delegations. He spoke about the sorrow and the shame and about also being willing to come to Canada in the summer to be able to offer an apology on Canadian soil. And I think, you know, when you look at how things happen in this country, I think, you know, from many people, just individuals in a number of communities, when that first hit in the summer, people were motivated to do a variety of things, but I think it has, a lot of people thought that day would never come, and the Pope should definitely get accolades and for doing that. And I know people are looking forward to seeing him. We have from Metro Vancouver an update, and it's a really good one. There's a regional public works mutual aid agreement. It has gone through 2 of the committees that I'm on. It was very well received by the committee, and it is essentially this. Metro Vancouver has set up a system where all the communities in Metro are able to connect with other communities, and on an emergent basis, based on the needs of both communities, come together to provide assistance. And it was interesting, I was sitting with the Anmore mayor, and he indicated, as I was, that neither Anmore or Belcarra was on it. And so I'm looking forward to bringing it forward to our council, letting them have a look at it, and hopefully going ahead. It will be an outstanding arrangement, and it's very agile, and it's really come about from what we faced as a metro and beyond in the last 8 months to a year. So anyways, I'm looking forward to bringing that forward. And a very quick announcement for people that are interested in the hospice that does very, very good work, ask if we could put it on. So thank you for Paula for putting it on. That there's on Sunday, May 29th, 2022 at Port Moody Civic Center, there's an annual hike for hospice. And so we wanted to give them a little bit of advertising. And if you want to come along, it's always a good thing. It's not a run, it's simply a hike, and it's coming together for some very important things. And then the final one I would like to end off with is I had a week ago Saturday, had the pleasure of joining 4 other mayors and a councillor at the Share 50th anniversary. And the job for the mayors and the councillor was to help with the fundraising by helping to judge the culinary competition. So finally, after all this time, being a mayor, not all this time, but for the time I've been on, I finally found something that I can do pretty well. So I worked with the other mayors, we ate some food, and we told them later who they thought produced the best food. And it was amazing food from people in the Tri-City. And I'll share to you, it was the first event that I'd been to where it was open, people could wear masks if they want, but it was really nice to get together with people. So anyways, I'll conclude there. And if there's any questions, I'd be glad to take them. If not, if there's any of the leads that want to make any comment, questions, comment, not seeing any, then we will go to Paula is going to outline the next item. Please.
Okay, so we have appointed Dennis Back as the acting chief administrative officer. He's away on a previously scheduled engagement, but he will attend the next regular council meeting, and everybody will have the opportunity to meet him at that time. And a Metro Vancouver update, April 20th, 2022, there's a public hearing, and the purpose of the hearing is to hear from the public on the MVRD Regional Growth Strategy Bylaw number 1339, 2022. I can put information up on the website so that people can see what the public hearing is all about. They plan to keep the hearing open until everyone has had the opportunity to speak. I'll put it on the website tomorrow, so there'll be a link there where you can click on it and get further information from Metro Vancouver. And that's all I've got.
Okay, and then I think we're on right now the village of 8.1. And we've got the village of Belcarra 5-year 2022-2026 financial plan bylaw number 594 2021 amendment bylaw number 597 2022 be read a third time. So looking for Councillor Clark.
Sorry, Mayor Ross, I was on the other item. I just would like to give a quick update if I may, but if it's too late, that's okay too.
Oh, no. If you're on from a lead, so why don't you go ahead for sure? I missed you.
Yes, I'm sorry, everybody. No, it's okay. I put my hand up too late, but I just want to make a quick comment that there will be a survey coming up about parking, and it will be up on the website. It's going to be SurveyMonkey. The residents that are signed up for the email updates from the village will receive the notice. But I wanted to let everybody know to look out at the website because it should be up in the next week or so. Thank you very much, Mayor Ross.
No, that's fine. And no worries. Yes, you get your hand up and we'll get you. No worries. While we're on it, we've got that 5-year. So do we have a counselor that will move it and a counselor that will second it?
So moved.
Thank you, Counselor Drake. And a second, Counselor.
Councillor Snell seconding.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm sorry. For some reason, I'm not sure why I've, let me just. Okay, so it's on the floor. Any discussion? From councillors? Counselor Snell, did you want to make a comment on this or?
You're muted.
Sorry, I didn't know if Counselor Snell wanted to make a comment. Ken, did you want to make a comment on this?
This is the bylaw?
Yes, yeah, 8-1.
Yeah, so this is an amendment bylaw that has, of course, gone first 2 readings. It's merely to allow for the funds for the project carry forward for the OCP and the asset management mainly. And so under the community charter, you're allowed to amend bylaws.
Yeah.
So this is merely an amendment of the already passed and adopted financial plan bylaw.
Okay, good. Any, not seeing any comments from council, so we'll go out to the audience. Anybody from the audience would like to comment? Not seeing. So we'll come back and I'm looking at council. I'm not seeing any further speakers. I'm not seeing everybody on my screen right now though. So, but I'm not seeing anybody raise their hand. So I'll look to call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, and I would note that it carries in the affirmative. So we're now on to correspondence and proclamations. And so we've got in front of us that correspondent items 9.1 to 9.26 be received. And if I could get a counselor to move it. Counselor
So
Green.
moved.
Thank you very much. And Counselor. We have a counselor that would.
Councillor Snell has seconded. I assume you can't see him?
No, for some reason I can't see him. So if, thank you for that. Okay, so okay, so no further discussion on that. I'll look to call the motion on receipt. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're back in business. Thank you. Okay. So action items we have, so we'll go through. I've got 9.1, David Cheng, board member, Stand With Coalition. Do we have someone to move that?
So moved.
Councilor Drake moving. Councilor Snell, thank you very much. Seconding. Any discussion on that? On council, looking to see if there's any on the, anybody in the audience. I'm not seeing that, so we'll come back and I'll look to call the question on 9.1. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, and then we have Leanne Strachan that council support the St. John Ambulance Start Me Up BC campaign, and that's with the defibrillators. And the good thing is that our acting corporate officer, Paula Richardson, did a great job in connecting. I connected with her, she connected, and we have one right over there in the corner. So their very good campaign is to try and get one in every municipality. And so we're ahead, but it's a very good thing, some good forward thought. So any
I'll move the
comments on that? Oh, sorry, go ahead,
You
Councillor
have,
Drake,
it-
please.
you have it recommended, or did I miss that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's just that we need to move it and second it, right? Do we have a mover and seconder?
I'll move.
Move, second, okay, it's on the thing. Any comments from council? Any comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'll look to call the question on 9.2. In favor?
Aye.
Okay, aye, and it looks like it carries. And then if we go to 9.3, and this has from Leonard Castley, Mayor Village of New Denver, letter dated March 14, 22 regarding support for Ukraine. That council sent a letter of support for the Village of New Denver resolution to condemn recent actions taken by Russia in its invasion and attacks on the sovereign nation of Ukraine. So do we have a councillor to move it or second it?
I'll move the recommendation.
Councillor Drake, and I see Councillor Snell seconding, so it's on the floor for discussion. Anyone from council? Anyone from the audience? Okay, so I'm looking to call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and I note that I believe it carries unanimously from the people in the room. Okay. And 9.4 is Janet Andrews, Secretary Treasurer, New Westminster and District Labor Council, letter dated March 14th regarding the declaration of April 28, 22 as the official day of mourning for workers killed and injured on the job. And that we would look to, it would be a motion moved by a councillor, seconded, that council declare April 28, 2021 as the official day of mourning for workers killed and injured on the job. So do we have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Snell, thank you, moving. Councillor Drake, seconding. It's on the floor for discussion from council. Looking to see if anybody in the audience. Seeing none, we'll look to call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And I note that it's unanimous and appreciate that, and I know they will. So we have on starting at 9.5 information items. And if anybody on council wants to do anything on that, any of those to make them action, we've actually got a fair amount there. We can have a look, and if we're, so why don't I open up to council?
I'll move that we receive them for information.
I would second that.
Okay, good. Okay, so we're just, we'll repeat that. We've kind of received them, but we'll just move receipt for information. So thank you on that one. Okay, any discussion on that with council? Any discussion with anybody in the audience? Not seeing any. We'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we're able to go on to new business, and Councillor Drake, you let us know there was something on it and important. So why don't you go ahead at this point, if you would, please.
Thank you. Yes, I've conveyed a motion by email to council members, and I trust that Paula has it. I'll just read it out for the sake of the gallery. Move that our village convey to Metro Vancouver the importance of emphasizing in its 2022 Regional Parks Plan update, 1, an analysis of the probable impact of climate change, open brackets, in particular drier and hotter summer conditions, close brackets, on forested areas within its parks. 2, mitigation strategies to reduce the risk of wildfires despite climate change. And 3, take steps in advance to ensure that when fires do occur within parks, their duration and damage is kept to a minimum. And 4, work with other stakeholders to reduce these risks and improve the capacity to respond effectively. So it's a motion, so I'll hopefully get a seconder.
Yep, so you've moved it, and I see a seconder with Councillor Snell. Thank you. And we'll open it up for discussion with council.
You're gonna talk about that or? me?
Yes.
Okay.
Did you, Bruce, did you want to say anything now or are you good?
No, I think it's
Yeah.
self-explanatory. Thank you.
Okay, and so I see we have, so we'll move out to the audience right now. And Sherry, go ahead, please.
Yeah,
Welcome.
hi. You know, really the park and its forest is a great concern in the summer with the dry forest. Is it possible that the park would consider on some of its main areas of foot traffic, like down to Admiralty Point and up to Jug Island, that they might consider bringing in a direct water for fire hydrants? Then maybe we could latch onto their system, not have a storage tank, because really they're bringing 1 million people into the park each year. It's only a matter of time before someone has a campfire. Could it be proposed, do you think?
So the proposal would be that they would provide a water system.
Firefighting system.
For firefighting
Yeah,
on the 2 main trails. One to
Well-
Jug Island, one to Admiralty Point.
well, I can, I mean, council could look at that piece, but the other thing that could happen, Paul has done a great job. Ask her to put up the Metro Vancouver parks, that reaction that people can go in. And they say it takes about 8 minutes, but I find it, well, for me, it took about 12 or 13 minutes, but you can customize it. So there's a whole range of answers, and then you can go in and do a piece. So that's one place you could do it, and council could look at as they are going forward and looking at pieces, whether in fact we could, propose at some point some different actions that Metro may take to assist us.
Yeah, I think that it would mean a lot more coming from our mayor and council, because the park is a big risk for us in the summer, or maybe when we have the extreme dry. I mean, maybe they shouldn't let people in the park if they can't protect it. And that'd be pretty hard to do.
To what part?
Close
Sorry,
the
Sharon?
parks.
Yeah.
So
I would say this, that, we're looking to do some things to engage with Metro. So our council will be doing some things going forward. I'm not sure what they are, but I've had conversations with Metro in terms of some of the challenges we have around people lighting fires on occasion and the chances for them to go out. And, I think a lot of that is in the initial stage. I'm not sure how they would react to it, but I wouldn't have a hesitation to engage them in terms of ways we can do it. So, yeah.
yeah, I mean, hydrants would be a great thing because they're Metro Vancouver, they're part of the water company. So
Yeah.
if they could get a direct line, which they could certainly do as they're part of the corporation.
Yeah, let me just, I mean, I know we provide water to the area that's close by you, right? To the
Yes.
concession. And so my hesitation is not that they wouldn't engage with us, but I just think right now that focus that they have is like they had arranged to get support from us to provide water in the park.
Yes,
And, I would just say this, that when I talk with Metro, they're very open, and they are in particular open to the small communities. So having said that, I mean, I want to check with our council, but I'd have no hesitation to talk to them generally about that.
yeah, like the water that we provide is for their washrooms and their concession stand, but our water can't fight forest fire.
No, yeah, and
And they're bringing a lot of people into the forest, and it's only getting hotter and drier every summer.
yeah,
So I think, I think it's a reasonable argument with them, but I'll leave that with you and your counsel and.
yeah. Yeah, and so I'd have no, once I talk to our council about that, I'd have no hesitation to engage with
Excellent.
them. I do know that I had a discussion about the BC Wildfire Service, and it was interesting because I think a few months ago, Sherry, you talked about, if we've got a wildfire, we want to be able to have like, I think, I don't want to misquote you, but we want to be able to get some, some bombers and some, helicopters to do it. And when the wildfire service was announced from the BC government that it was going to go ahead and not stop in September, but be a year-round service, I talked to Metro about that because I think that's a place that Metro can look to support us, another small community, to ensuring that the new BC Wildfire Service is aware that it's not only communities, but it's parks that are on the edges of communities. So
Yeah, very, very high danger area with so many visitors.
Yeah, so I think I didn't mean to misquote you, but I remembered you saying that when the wildfire service, I spoke about it here, and I actually talked to Metro the other day about it, right? Just generally that we want to make sure they're using their influence to get that wildfire service understanding what we need. So, yep, we'll I'll talk with council and we'll look and yeah, good idea.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. So Bruce, any other speakers on that?
Yeah, I was only going to make one comment
sure.
there. Yeah, I think you've covered off the point. I think what we want to know is that the parks are aware of the high risk we are in, being in the interface between one and the other. And I think we need the assurance that they are in fact connected to the fire department and especially the aerial guys, because they're the ones that are going to put anything out. So it'd be nice to know that, yes, when there are people looking for telltale signs of a fire and there's a quick response process in place.
Yes.
Thank you. And again, that can be put in the questionnaire. Thank you.
Yep, good. Thank you very much. Okay, so any other speakers on that? Thank you, John. And seeing none, Bruce will look. Did you want to make a final comment or we'll look to call the question?
No, I'm happy just to have the question called at this
Okay,
point.
all those in favor on council, say aye.
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 Okay, and I note that it carries unanimously. And I think we're on to public question period. If anybody from the public has a question? No questions? Okay, what I will do is, seeing no questions, then I'll look for a motion to adjourn and
So moved.
so move and second it. John?
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay, good. Thank you. And so we will, I'll call the question. All those in favor, and we'll look to adjourn at 9:30. I look to adjourn at 9:36. And I want to thank everybody out there. I was trying to move us through tonight just because we'd kind of had some things that had got together. So thank you, everybody, for your cooperation and some really good discussion points. So have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Did a good job, Your Worship. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you, John. And thank you to Carolina for staying connected with us. Thank you. Okay. Good night, everybody. Take care.